Well, I didn't get in a hurry to get here, but it kind of makes you want to drive fast when you get ready to leave. We're right here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We're going to have a great time today looking at some of the historical vehicles that have won the Indy 500, as well as some other vehicles that have set other major world records. That and much more right here on the Out of the Norm show. So don't go away. Don't speed off. Yield. We'll be right back. Stop right here on the Out of the Norm show, where the stories all about you. We'll be right back.
It's the Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you, with author, musician, radio and television personality, and all-around nice guy, your host, Norm Allen.
Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Norm show, right here from Indianapolis, Indiana. This is a new friend and gentleman who's going to give us a story today. This is Mr. Donald Davidson. He's the historian for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Well, thank you so much for having us here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This looks very exciting. Now, I've never really been a race fan, but I can see where it's based on personality as much as it is on the skill on the track, isn't it?
Oh, for me personally, it's about the people. I'm not a gearhead, but I think what surprises a lot of people when they come in this museum is typically it's a very diversified collection. I think people think, well, it's just going to be a few Indianapolis cars, but typically we have passenger cars in here, motorcycles, European vehicles. We've got some land speed record vehicles, so there's plenty to see, lots of trophies, and the women seem to like the trophies.
Sure.
And we're open here every day of the year except for Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day.
Now, you have a lot of school groups come in also.
We do, yeah.
But what kind of educational programs do you provide, and what does it really teach them?
Well, typically the schools do that. In fact, we have the track does one version of the field trips, and then there's also the 500 Festival Committee. They have a program as well, and it's being taught in some of the schools in Indiana. Just a little bit of history.
The history of the automotive industry.
Both the automotive industry and then also Indianapolis Speedway, but there's a tie-in because there used to be a lot of automobile industry in this city.
But also you were telling me that the track was originally built for a lot of different things. It wasn't just built just for racing, was it?
No, it was built as a testing facility. Racing was going to be a part of the testing, but there were no paved roads in the state at that time. Some states were beginning to pave roads, but Indiana was not one. And the automobile companies, how you tested a vehicle was you took it out on the open road. And as the cars became capable of greater speeds, they thought, the public roads aren't any good anymore. They're not developed, and we need to find a place where we can get out and stand on it. And so the idea was to build a testing facility, a racetrack. And in the early days, there was a lot of crossover between automobiles and motorcycles and aviation. It seemed to be all the same people.
Aviation was involved in that too?
Yeah,
or just
absolutely.
the engineering?
Well, the fact that, the engine, the power plants were basically the same thing.
True.
And, we didn't have jets yet and all that kind of thing. And it just seemed to be all the same people. So the intent was that there would be an aviation presence here as well, as there was for the first few years.
And we're talking in 19...
Oh, we're talking 1909, 1910, 1911. There was an air display here in the summer of 1910. The Wright brothers were here, and one of their aircraft broke the world altitude record twice in 1 week, which I think...
40 feet above the ground.
Well, a little more than that, but you're close. I think it was 4,936 feet. Well, in those days, every time they had an aviation meet, then the record got broken. But for a couple of weeks, a month or whatever it was, the record was set here.
So the Wright brothers appeared right here at the Speedway?
Absolutely.
Wow, you've had a lot of dignitaries through here in the centuries you've been going.
Oh, as visitors and participants, yes.
Wow, a lot of famous people. Well, we're going to go and take a look at some of the cars. In fact, we're not going to take a break quite yet. I think we ought to go and start out with the first one. And we'll go down there and look at that and give you a little view, and we'll be right back after a quick break. So don't go away. The Out of the Norm show continues on from Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
The Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you. Where the stories are all about this. We'll be right back after this.
Thank you, troops. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about this car.
All right, well, this is the winner of the first 500 in 1911, and this is the real thing. This is not a mock-up that, you know, restoration built 20 years ago. This is probably about, I'd say, better than 95% original.
Wow.
And we think it's the third coat of paint, but you know, the body and everything that you see except for the tires just about are all original. And the unique thing about it is that in those days, typically everybody carried a riding mechanic in a second seat. This car was built with a streamlined body, and it's a single-seater. So during practice, there were complaints from some of the other competitors that said, look, this driver is a hazard out there because he doesn't have somebody that can warn him that somebody's coming up one side or the other. So he, not only was he a driver, but he was an engineer, Ray Haroun, and he remembered something he'd seen years before, and he went and got a mirror. And so what we see here on the rods above the cowling is a 3x8-inch mirror. And so he could drive along, supposedly, and see behind him. Well, when I was first around as a young man, I was privileged to be able to go visit Ray Haroun. And I asked him about that, and he said, actually, it shook so bad I couldn't see a damn thing in it anyway.
Because of the vibration.
But he said I was the only person that knew that.
So the braking system and the gear systems are outside the car over here?
Yes, and I don't, not being a gearhead, I can't tell you what all of this does.
I would say this is a brake.
Okay, yeah.
This looks like the gear shift. We'll just call it that because today we're the experts.
That's all right.
The first winner, 1911.
Yeah.
How fast did it go?
The average speed was 75 miles an hour. Well, 74.602. He could have gone faster, but he'd figured out months before in practice that you run a planned race. If you have to stop and change tires, that takes a while because they didn't have detachable wheels. You had to change the tires. But he figured that if the difference between running over 80 miles an hour and running 75, you could double your tire wear. So he said, all right, that's what we'll do. I'll just run 75 and...
Now, as time has gone on, we started with the very first one in 1911, and now we're all the way up 40-something years later to 1953, 54 for this car. And I see some differences, quite a bit of differences.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, the tires don't look the same.
Nope.
What is the difference in the tires?
Well, they're smaller, and they were going to be smaller. You know, not too long after this, they'd start getting wider and wider. But the main characteristic about this car is that it was designed specifically for Indianapolis, which is all left-hand turns, 4 left-hand turns and long straightaways. So it's actually offset. And the cockpit, I don't know if we can see this very clearly, but the cockpit is offset to the right.
Sure.
The engine is over to the left, and the drive shaft, now in the past you had the drive shaft running between your ankles. Here, the drive shaft runs alongside the driver. He's sitting down there with it almost next to his hip. And so the body work is built up on this side, but it's cut down here. And so he's making all left-hand turns.
Now, would that be spinning? I mean,
yes.
So right there next to his feet, he'd have the spinning drive shaft?
You don't want to touch it, no.
Boy, it's a pants leg get in that. That'd be tough.
Oh, yes, right.
Well, honey, I'll be home in about 20 seconds. Donald, this is a great old car. This was A.J. Foyt from Houston. Tell me a little bit about what this car has been through.
Well, it was built in 1963. It's an A.J. Watson Roadster, Roadster being a nickname, and this is based on an earlier car that we saw, and as you can see, you are over to the right, and if you look down to your left, there's a drive shaft down there, and then the engine is over to the left. And this is a pretty neat car because it had a fairly short career because the rear engine cars were coming in, so it was retired after the '64 season, and it was only its second year. But it was George Bignotti, the famous 7-time winning chief mechanic, was the crew chief, and the car was painted by a hot rodder named Dean Jeffries, who is still going today and well known in Hollywood, and in fact he's a stunt man.
I think he's also built a lot of the prop cars too, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. But all of his painting, he was great on pinstriping, and he used pearlescent, which you see on the hood here. And I've seen other people try to do a pearlescent paint job, but it never quite turns out like his. And this is original from 1964.
I love it.
And anyway, he worked alone, and
Now, this is one of the cars that AJ won in, but he won the,
yes.
the Indy four times?
4 times. 61, 64, which is this one, and then 67 is just a little to your left, and that was an early rear engine car that won. And then over the top of your head, I think we could see the Gilmore 14, which was the 1977, and the history-making 4th winner.
The cockpit is not really complicated. There's an on and off switch.
Yeah.
There's an RPM meter.
Yes.
And a temperature gauge, and that's pretty much it.
Actually, and then another thing too was that some of the drivers in the race, they would either tape over the instrument dashes or they would take them off. Because the thinking was, look, we're not going to do anything. We just need to know in practice what the readings are. When it's time for the race, run it till it blows up.
Run it till it blows up. And many of them did.
Yeah.
Well, this is it's really tight, and I know AJ Foyt's not a small man, but this, I guess the seat is designed for the safety to hold you in there.
Yes, and then of course you've got there's an over-the-shoulder harness behind
harness
you.
straps. Now getting out of here is going to be another thing. Okay, we've just won, and now how do you get out? It's kind of a...
Careful.
I've had phone booths that were easier. Oh. So far, so good. Well, that wasn't so bad at all. Mr. A.J. Foyt, this is beautiful. Hey, we're going to take a quick break here from the Out of the Norm show. We're going to let some of our sponsors make a little money, we hope, and hope you'll stick around with us because we have a whole lot more for you right here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Indianapolis, Indiana. You're on the Out of the Norm show where the stories are all about you, and we will be right back after this short break. We've seen these wonderful old machines from the early 1900s, and now we've gone all the way, it looks almost like the space age. What is man's drive to go fast?
Oh, I don't know. But what we're seeing here has nothing to do with the Indianapolis Speedway, which is part of the diversity.
But it has to do with the need for speed.
Oh,
though.
yeah, yes. Oh, yeah. This was the first car, this broke the 600-mile-an-hour barrier at Bonneville in 1965. Craig Breedlove, the Spirit of America, jet-powered vehicle, and that was actually a two-way run. You had to do a return run within 30 minutes, I think. But yeah, the cockpit's up the front.
Jet-powered?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So it's probably not very heavy then, overall.
I don't know what it weighs. I don't know what it weighs.
That's beautiful, though.
And then, in fact, down here, believe it or not, that is a motorcycle. That was Calvin Rayburn, who was a great road racer. They built this, actually it was a fellow named Dennis Manning built the car. And so the driver, if you got claustrophobia, you don't want to be doing this because you just lie on your back. And then they put the body on and, you know, it's right here.
Can you see out at all? I mean, there's a steering mechanism?
Actually, you can see through this. This is a window, so you're lying on your back,
so
but you can look straight through and get a pretty good view.
So we're talking going 200 or 300 miles an hour in this thing.
Yes, 250 something, I believe it was.
And it's on two wheels.
Yes, the Harley engine is in the back, and so I think. I mean, they would have to be holding the thing up. There's a stand on it right now, but you took that off, and then they would just run and push it, and then
to balance.
Off you go. Yes, but I mean, you're lying on your back and steering like that.
Riding a bullet.
Yes, you've got to want to do it.
I don't think it'd be something that I would be interested in doing. So we have this wonderful technology for the need for speed in the 21st century, in the 20th century, and here's a beautiful old Cummins diesel.
Yep.
So was this one of the first diesel-powered engines? Tell me a little bit.
Actually, well, Cummins was a local company, fairly local. It's Columbus, Indiana, which is just down the road a piece. And in 1931, there had been a change in specifications the year before because they had kind of got away from the production car firms and they wanted to get them back in. So Classy Cummins came up here and said, look, we've got this diesel truck engine we've been working on and we think it would do okay at the Speedway, but Anyway, the end result is that they bought a car and it ran the entire 500 miles in 1931, finished 13th, and it never made a pit stop. So, I mean, it was far behind the others, but they never came in. And so in 34, there were 2 Cummins diesels, and then in 50, this is actually a Curtiss Craft from Glendale, California, but it's got a Cummins diesel truck engine in, 401 cubic inches with a supercharger. It dropped out fairly early, but they took the same engine and put it in another car that Cummins still owns, and they laid the engine, 6-cylinder engine, laid it on its side, and that won the pole in 1952, but it was 401 cubic inches with a turbocharger on top of that.
Wow, big heavy vehicle, wasn't it?
Yes, it was very heavy, and they had problems with tire wear going through the turns because the car was much heavier than the others.
They started out in gasoline, just regular gasoline?
I'm not sure what the early fuels were. I'm not a gearhead,
right.
But gasoline was used. But in the mid-20s, they started to use methanol as an option, and you could run whatever you wanted to. And so there was different schools of thought on that for a while. Now it's ethanol, but for a while you could choose, and some people would use methanol for qualifying and then run gasoline in the race, or avgas. And then others would do methanol only. By the time you got to around 50, 51, nobody was using gas anymore. And then in 63, Ford Motor Company came in and said, we want to run gasoline. And so for a couple of years there, you could use one or the other. Then it went to methanol only, and now it's ethanol.
Ethanol.
Ethanol, yes.
So it's a good high, heavy, fast octane fuel.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't really burn well in your personal car,
No,
would it?
you'd have to make a few adjustments.
Kind of like how to keep it on the freeway at 241 miles an hour. Well, this is fascinating. Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to show us around here. I mean, this is just a lovely collection, and it's just not only a part of American automotive history, but it's a part of American sports history.
It is.
Yeah. It's quite exciting to see all these things. Like I said, I've never been a real motorhead either, but this kind of makes me want to keep up with it a little more after visiting here. And
Come back anytime.
And the race will be coming up soon, won't it?
Very soon, end of May.
All right. Well, I thank you again for taking the time to be with us,
My
brother.
pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, we're going to head outside now, and I think we're going to go out and take a look at the track, and I don't know what other surprises we have in store for you, but don't go away, because I guarantee there will be something cool coming up on the Out of the Norm show, because the story's all about you. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Norm show. We're in a great place today. My new friend Tom Serber is going to tell us a little bit about where we are. It's not a freeway, however, it kind of looks like one occasionally, doesn't it?
Well, for a few days a year when we're racing and practicing and qualifying out here, it's about the fastest place going. This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was built in 1909, originally to be a test track for automobile manufacturers here in the central Indiana area, which there are about 20 or so at the time. The original surface was asphalt and tar, and they realized shortly after that, in testing the cars, that wasn't a very even surface, so they decided to put bricks here. And they put 3.2 million bricks here around the 2.5 mile oval, which is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And in 1909 and 1910, they had a couple motorcycle races, a few relatively short automobile races, and a hot air balloon race emanating from here. Then in 1911, they decided that we would have one major race here each year, and they called it the Indianapolis 500. And this past year we celebrated our 100th anniversary in Indianapolis 500. In 2016 it'll be the 100th race for the Indianapolis 500. So it's quite a place with an amazing history, and
it seats too. I mean, this thing is huge.
Yeah.
You were telling me a little bit earlier off camera about how big the facility is.
Well, the facility is enormous. There are more than 250,000 seats here, permanent seats, which makes it the largest seating facility in the world.
We're actually standing right at the starting line.
This is it. This is the start line, and of course the famous yard of bricks. And those of you who've watched the 500 and the Brickyard 400 in recent years know that there's a tradition of the winning driver and team coming out and kissing the bricks. That all started in 1996 when Dale Jarrett won the Brickyard 400 as a driver, and he wanted to pay respect to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, And he did it by bringing himself and his team out here, and they all knelt down and kissed the bricks. And now everyone who wins here ever since has done the same thing with their team. And it's become a very popular tradition for anyone who comes out here, whether it's a group of school kids on a tour or what have you. They all want to kneel down and kiss the bricks, and it's something that has become one of our most favorite traditions here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
I think I'm going to pass on the kissing the bricks, mainly not because I wouldn't think the bricks were attractive, but I couldn't get back up again after
I'm the same way, to be honest with you. Too many knee surgeries.
Well, it's very, very exciting to be standing right here, and the checkered flag will be waved from right there very soon, and the crowds will be going crazy, and I can just feel the magic in the place.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it. I come here every day, and there's not a day that goes by where I don't feel it. It's just one of those very special bucket list type places.
Sure.
That we have people from all over the world come here and see, whether it's race season or not. We'll have people from all over the world here in December or January, whatever. People come to Indianapolis, want to come and see this place and experience it for themselves, and virtually everyone walks away impressed, I can assure you.
Now the marks on the pavement here, tell me about these.
These are really for starting positions for MotoGP races. That they don't have any effect at all on Brickyard 400 or the Indianapolis 500 at all. It's just for the motorcycle races. And we also had marks like that for, because there's at a standing start.
Right.
Whereas the Indy 500 and the Brickyard 400 have a running start. Now there's one brick in particular here that's kind of special.
Okay.
This was placed in here a week before last year's 500. It's to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Indianapolis 500. And it was put in place here by our chairman of the board, Mary Holman George, along with four-time winner of the Indianapolis 500, A.J. Foyt, along with our president and CEO, Jeff Belskis. For A.J. Foyt, it was kind of interesting because in 1961, there was another brick placed here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the 500. Ray Haroun, who won the first race in 1911, was part of that ceremony with Tony Holman, who bought the Speedway and owned it since World War II. And the curious thing about that is 1961 was AJ's first win in the 500.
Right.
So when he put the brick in here, he was celebrating 50 years since his first win of the four that he had, the last one being in 1977. So
is the 50-year anniversary brick in here somewhere still?
No, that's over. It's on exhibit over at the museum.
Oh, okay.
That was taken out. But,
so this will be eventually on the museum too, or do you think this is going to stay?
Don't know what the future of it's going to be, but for right now, it sits here and it's in place very well. And
it'd be great to have the whole thing here, wouldn't
it? Yeah, but it's a neat thing, and it was a really neat, makes for a neat display.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to bring us around, and this is a rare experience to get to stand out here on this speedway. This is very exciting. This is not just a Super Bowl, this is even bigger than that because it's been going for over 100 years.
And this is the world capital of auto racing. It truly is, and motorsports in general. So it's a very special place. It's something all of us in Indiana are really proud of. We're glad you can be with us today.
You can't go apart from things that are so dear and true, like loving the South and me just loving you.
Hey, don't forget to set your DVR because you won't want to miss a single story on the Out of the Norm show every Sunday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern, 11 o'clock Central, right here on Rural TV, television for a growing world.